houses. And let's face it, like my sources confirm, most of the money is in the houses. Liquid money is $7-8 million tops. 3 houses, condo in San Francisco, his house up on Oriole in the Bird Streets in the hills of Beverly, and her house down the road from Stan. And, of course, that half a condo, the Jerry Oliveira's condo. But another character problem is that Jerry doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who would go live with his boyfriend in that condo that he grifted from Stan. Jerry wants to be famous, like Kia. Source replies, he's still the least of the worst. If I could keep them all away, I would. And that's how I'd feel if I was sitting where my source was sitting. But from where I'm sitting, here in the gray zone, I'm thinking that what's really at issue here in a lot of ways is Stan's last days, it's a particularly tabloid sort of tag on a story, Stan's last days. But let's face it, the man is 95. These are his last days.
Well, and also you got to look at the history of comic book publishing. How many issues have sold on could this be the end of Spider-Man?
Exactly. And that's a great analogy, Dr. David. I mean, but it makes you wonder back to what JC's next move is. Will she make a PR move pointing the finger at Marvel? And my source says no. Stan's life was completely uneventful up until the point Max Anderson came into it. Max Anderson, as you'll know from my reporting and other reporting, that, the Daily Mail, TMZ, blah, blah, blah. Max is Stan's / road manager, road minder, bodyguard, frontman, bodyman, whatever. Fucking skell. Stan would sign comic books and no one gave a shit back in the day, says my source. He'd sign comic books for hours and no one cared. He started doing those movie cameos, which gave him a lot of notoriety, and Max saw it as an opportunity to make a lot of money. Max, my source says, is the best and worst thing to happen to Stan Lee. He was responsible for making him a lot of money early on, so he could make his money in the later years when Stan ceased being able to function himself. Money started to disappear a little bit early on. And, my thought is I can see him. He's running the old man around the world like a dog. Worse than that, my source says. Stan has been traveling against medical orders for a year now. He should not be traveling. And he's had to sign a waiver acknowledging that he shouldn't be doing it. It's about Stan and the care that he has not been given. Linda Sanchez. You might remember her from TMZ. She was that Linda Sanchez, a nurse who, as reported, admitted to giving him naked showers and also accused of giving Stan happy ending massages. Well, my source says she's not a real nurse and she's not qualified to be taking care of Stan. There are 2 nursing companies she's been fired from, and I need someone to answer why that is. This is beyond all the happy ending massage bullshit. I just need you to see that Stan was constantly put in dangerous situations with the full acknowledgement of that nurse, Linda, and Max, or that fake nurse, Linda, who's banging Max, as reported. He goes on, I need to live in a world where the bad guys get theirs, just in some capacity, And Linda Sanchez never wore nursing clothes. She wore designer clothes. Stan went to Australia for 2 weeks, Hong Kong for a week, and with no doctor visits, no medical attentions. This was the woman who was solely responsible for his care. Who makes those decisions? You're signing autographs and taking photographs for 10 hours out of the day. At the end, Stan's tired. Hey, Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Who's handling the money? Source says Max is the sole person handling the money, but he's built himself an infrastructure where he's not the only one with contact of the money, and he's going to try and blame other people for the accounting of the money. And that's going to be his fallback. He's going to say, well, my guys count the money, and if money disappeared, then they must have stolen the money, not me. Fingers pointing in all directions. He's going to try and sell everyone who has had access to Stan out. So, he explains, Jerry, the lesser of all evils, is now more important to Stan than Max. Makes me think, well, it seems like Jerry, for every move that he makes, he seems like a con man. I mean, witness the Hands of Respect, the fake charity that he convinced Stan to get behind. Yeah, my source says it's always money is coming, and then it never materializes. Jerry's motive has always been money, but he's the least sharky of the sharks. He wanted Jerry to sign something here and there, but the money was minimal. Whereas with Max, he'd stand with Stan until he was falling asleep, watching that old man get ground down. So I guess Jerry Oliveras is a kinder. He's a kinder, gentler con man. And as my source says, the unfortunate part of Stan's life right now is that this is the best he can do. That is the best scenario. Okay, there's this thing called the Stan Lee Museum. Now, key in here, folks. Everything in it is Max Anderson's. Now, it says Stan Lee Museum, but it's just shit that he's bought. Now, a lot of the stuff was bought with money he's taken from Stan, but everything in it is Max's. And, you know, even the lawyers for Stan will maintain that all the Stan Lee stuff is Stan's, knowing full well that Max will take the position that it's his should this ever hit a courtroom. And as I'm, saying that, my source says, listen, I'm getting there. There are various keys to the city that Stan got. There are awards that Stan got. There are declarations that Stan got. Those are sitting in Max Anderson's house. Stan has said that Max has just come into the house and taken stuff, ripped it off the walls. Max's position will be, Stan doesn't want that stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, says my source. Stan doesn't give a shit about a key to the city, but he never said take it. Just because he doesn't care, that doesn't mean you can take it, right? So what about this museum? My source says it's enormous. It's huge. It's art and statues and giant Iron Man costumes. You can see videos of it on YouTube. And how it gets there is Max goes to people and says, can you donate this to the Stan Lee Museum? And people think, Stan Lee, yeah, sure. There's been many in the comic world, a lot of high-end artists and such, who are talking about how great Max is. Yeah, Max is great for Stan, blah, blah, blah. Kevin Smith has been echoing that sentiment. The problem is, if you dig just under the surface, there's an artist named J. Scott Campbell. You know him?
Oh, yeah.
You like him?
I do.
Good. Well, he was one of the first people on the internet to speak out for Max Anderson. So, it's hard it's hard for me to like J. Scott Campbell very much at this juncture. J. Scott Campbell's very influential. He makes millions of dollars a year. Max has given him over $1 million in cash to buy art for him in the last couple of years. I reached out to J. Scott Campbell via direct message and on social media. I tweeted to him. And, I hadn't heard back, and I'm still talking to my source, and my source says, now, if I were given $1 million, I might say something great about you too. And all his art, you can see it. You can see the value of it. So all the new artists that come out, Max Max Anderson, he's been spending all kinds of money buying shit, currying the favor of these artists because, well, he spends money on them. But my source asked the question, where is that $1 million in cash coming from? To me, it makes perfect sense because if you're going to launder money, you go into tangibles like art. Exactly, says my source. So I want to get a read on this artist, Campbell. Campbell is a famous comic book artist. I guarantee, says my source, that he hasn't declared this money. So he's probably thinking, holy fuck, I probably should have played this a little smarter. Campbell finally responded to my tweet. And I'll quote him. I really don't know anything, only expressed concern because of his inability to be reached by longtime friends and colleagues. Well, that's not entirely true because Campbell also tweeted in die-hard support of Max Anderson. So, if we're going to circle around back to the Stan Lee Museum, the important thing to ask is, where is it? And who owns Stan's keys to the city and the Stan Lee Day plaques? Who owns it? Where is it? It sort of comes full circle to the Campbell thing, says my source. He drew a piece of art of Joni and the young Stan. It says that right on the thing. It says, to Joni and Stan. Now that is in the Stan Lee Museum. And Max Anderson, quote unquote, owns it? Well, my source says Stan has no idea it exists. So the question that needs to be asked is, who is going to advocate for Stan when he's gone? Who's going to get that stuff back? Who's going to get Stan's net worth back up to around $50 million? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, there's JC's lawyer, JC being Stan Lee's daughter. I mean, they got to have their eyes on that, all that stuff. My source says, well, it's going to be much harder than that. He gave it to me. Did he sign anything? No, why would he? We were friends. This is how, this is the position Max Anderson would take. Good luck fighting that out. Stan's alive now. He could say, I want that shit back. He could go to the police and he could get that shit back. That's what my source is hoping.
Well, thank God he's too old to try and pull an OJ.
Yeah, right? So, my thought is, or he could go to the police and get his shit back, or this guy, Max Anderson, may become completely radioactive to the point where he can't move any of that shit. Source says, well, the stuff is so one of a kind that he can't move anything now, and he won't. Everything is about power with Max Anderson. He's not pissed that he'd been separated from Stan. All that crying. I mean, I've heard this. My sources are telling me that Stan's calling people and he's crying. It's bullshit. It's not Stan who he misses. He misses the power. My source says he likes telling people no. He likes the ass kissing. He likes being in control. And that's what he misses. He doesn't give a shit about Stan. Makes you wonder, how did these two guys meet? Well, my source says Stan does not remember how he met him. The story that Max tells is that he was at a convention back when no one gave a shit about Stan, and Stan was signing some autographs and then left. So Max missed him. They went, Max didn't get to signing. Stan didn't get to signing something for Max's kid or something like that. So Max is like, where's Stan? And the people at the convention are like, oh, he went down that way. Max runs after him, and Mike Kelly, that's Stan's assistant, he grabs Mike Kelly, but Mike is like, no autographs, we're leaving. And Max puts him into a headlock and says, I just want one. And then Stan says, okay, I'll give you an autograph if you let him go. That's
Jesus.
Max. Yeah, that's Max's story. Oh, so a random dude